righty, good people. Welcome back to another episode of Summertime Conversations on Feeling Good with myself, Grace Gibson, and my wonderful co-host,
Kanika Robinson.
Yes, and as you know, so this Summertime Conversation was inspired by Nina Simone's 1965 classic song, Feelin Good. And
Mhm.
so Summertime Conversations on Feeling Good is about exploring the lived experiences of Black joy. And we're
Right.
doing this like very free form dialogue, which talks about things from people of African descent. And we're talking about communal agency, collective resilience, all through this cultivation of joy.
Mhm.
So today's episode, I think, just be prepared because in the end, just your appetite may be awakened at the end of this episode. So today we're going to be looking at culinary curation of happiness via Black Foodways. So
Mhm.
we're going to be talking about food. We're going to be talking about drinks. We're going to be talking about soul food, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
So, what you got for us, Kaniqua?
So one thing I want to, even as we talk about this, keep in mind food is important, right? It's a part of our life. It is life. It is, food is important for us to live. And so we're going to speak about it in regards to joy and what it really means in our culture and how it's tied to food. So yes, I'm very excited to have this conversation. But before we jump too far in, I want to ask this question.
Yes.
What is an important cuisine of your family?
Hmm. You said what is an important cuisine or
Or
what's
a popular cuisine, something that your family is known for or is always there at a family dinner.
okay. So collard greens, macaroni and cheese, those are like for sure going to be there. Cornbread, and either yams or sweet potatoes, like those four things for sure. And the meats will vary. So there's some kind of meat, whether it's chicken, ham, turkey. When rest my grandmother sold, chitlins was there quite often. Not so much now, but there was some type of meat out of one of those things. You either had poultry, you had turkey, you had pork, you had something. And then once I became a pescatarian, fish made its way in there. Like although catfish was there a lot, but it was kind of like that special meat in a way, kind of. It wasn't there always. It was like every Friday or something. But yeah, cornbread, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, sweet potatoes and yams. Those are like essential core things that were pretty much at every special type of cuisine occasion that we had in our house.
Okay, okay, I can see that. Now, I'm not a picky eater, but I don't really eat lots of things in regards to food per se. Um, I know because I had to call my dad last night and my sister. But one of the main things that we're known for is barbecue.
Okay. Uh-huh.
So one thing in the Robinson side of the family, they make their own barbecue. They pass down the barbecue sauce. And
Nice.
so it was critical. But we also have, roast. My grandmother, my maternal grandmother, fantastic cabbage and everything else. She was just a great cook. Cabbage, and they said potato salad. They like cornbread. I don't really like cornbread or potato salad, but that was the main dish as well. A
Right.
dish. So yeah, some other maybe like ham. Oh, and chicken.
Of course. Yeah. Of course.
That's a lot. Chicken is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that question because there are like these staples that we have as a part of our meals, and I think over time we've either embraced them, like we eat them all the time, or we love them, or we're like, yeah, not so much, like that's not my thing for me. Like I said, once I became pescatarian, a lot of things shifted,
Right.
and I can remember my grandmother being, or my family thinking something was wrong because, like food for Black folks is like essential. It's a communication, it's a connector. And when you've been used to eating something for so long and then there's this like huge shift, you know,
Right.
the family thinks something's wrong with you. It's either you sick or, you're going through something.
Right.
So, yeah. So
That
yeah,
was the beef and pork. When I stopped eating beef and pork, it was
right.
like So what you gonna eat?
Yes, I love that. That is the ultimate question, the $1,000,000 question. What you gonna eat? And
What
it's
you
like
gonna eat?
there's many things,
Um, there's
um,
a lot of
that
things that,
you eat.
well, granted, I can't probably eat chicken. You can have chicken and everything. Like chicken is delicious. And
Yeah,
cat, I really love you guys. Like it's the thing. Like cabbage is my life. And
that's the collard greens for me. Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate collard greens. One thing when I called my dad, he was like, we would cook it in different ways depending on the type of meat you would put in collard greens. So it would be 3 different types of collard greens. Not turning to mustard green. We don't really play with that too much. I mean, we eat it if it's there, but I mean, it's collard specifically. And
Yeah.
it depends on like you'll put, was it neck bones?
Yeah. I've seen the neck bones. I've seen the turkey necks. Yeah.
Yeah. So it all would depend, the flavor would depend on that. But yeah, I would just love cabbage. I have been chasing my grandmother's cabbage my entire life. Okay.
Wow.
She passed when I was in middle school. And it's funny because I feel like I loved her. She was everything to me. And her, my great grandmother, my grandmother, well, her specifically, she was known for the cabbage.
Hmm.
And it was so crazy. Like I remember when she passed, there was some cabbage left in the fridge. And I remember someone coming over saying, "Is it still good?" And it's like, no, ma'am, no, ma'am, do not eat that old cabbage. But it's something in that cabbage. I've been chasing the taste. I've tried so many different things. I think one of the critical things that I miss is because of the fact that I don't eat pork. I don't include pork in it. I
Right.
think that's the thing, but I don't know. I just have to throw it out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, which leads me to this particular thought that kind of stems from your question. So, there is this culinary creative named Teresa Nelson, well known in the culinary world, and she has this thought where she says, "quote Black people from all over the African diaspora have come here by force and by choice since the birth of this nation, and literally built what we call American cuisine."
Yes.
So, I can't help but think, yeah, if there's one thing that we have brought that is like across the board,
Mhm.
doesn't change, is food.
Yes.
Our contribution to American cuisine, and when I say our, Black people, African people of African descent, what we bring to the cuisine. You can't talk about food without talking about Black folks. You can't talk about food without talking about, what happened on the continent. Like you just can't. Like it's just
Right.
impossible.
And even we make fun of the conversation, but the seasoning, how it's important for our food, how we really impacted American cuisine. And even we'll talk about the sec, even things like rice.
Yeah.
And how it was us that brought rice and really cultivated rice here.
Yes.
And granted, I don't like rice, but a lot of people eat rice.
Hmm.
So it is, we did bring it. The way we cooked the rice, it was, yeah,
It's yes.
definitely part of American cuisine.
It's very much a universal love language.
Yeah,
I like to think of it as that. It is what ties people together.
right, right.
When we think about food, and we'll definitely engage with this a little bit later, but it connects us in the sense of like when there's a repast or a funeral, when
Mhm,
there's a celebration,
mhm.
when there is, I even think about like on college campuses, the way that you got college students to come to something was to say you had food,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Or even when you have college gatherings, like students, like, oh, we're gonna have food, maybe a little potluck or whatever, but we will bring food because, like you said, it's the communal aspect of that, and it's like a tie to our ancestry.
yep,
It's a tie to our past, something that's continued, just like with our language and how there's conversations about ebonics and the use of ebonics. And we can talk about that, the critical discussion later. But it's a direct tie to our past. And
right,
so even when, going back to that conversation on me chasing cabbage, it's my link to my grandmother
yep,
and her past and how she learned it. So
mhm,
it's like that's how we won. We get together, we form community. How we say we appreciate you, we thank you. Come eat with us. Like
exactly,
that's a form of love. It's a love language.
it is,
And the way in which and we'll talk about this more later, how we learn from our parents, our grandparents, our foremothers and forefathers about cooking, the cuisine.
yep.
It's our linkage to our past, acknowledging it.
So, speaking of like this connective tissue, because like I said, food is that it is this universal language, it is this connective tissue. There are definitely like staple foods that link
Right.
us to something prior to. And a lot of that is, America's dark past of enslavement, and also the great thing of African cultures. And so through that, the folks who were enslaved brought over it, carried over with them gems,
Yes.
jewels, just things that people I don't think appreciated, at that time, and who we like. It's a wealth of knowledge. Like it's not the greenback, but it is, in a way, so it's still wealth, you
Yes.
know.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
there was, the core staples: rice, okra, pork, and greens. Those are like, historically the staple foods that were brought over or that were, are connected, from African cultures. And a show that we'll engage with a little bit later, High on the Hog, the Netflix series,
Mhm.
definitely gives you that history lesson, definitely gives you that those roots
Right.
of where many of these foods came from. And that was as appetizing as the series was. It was very informational. I definitely got a lot out of it, more than I expected. I
Mhm.
expected to watch a show about food, and I got even more, with that. So
Right.
yeah. So what are your thoughts on like these staple foods that were brought over?
First of all, I was happy because first of all, rice is important to a lot of cuisine, especially in the South. And, came from the South. You think about what is in New Orleans, jambalaya,
Yep, yep,
beans and rice, and then you think about every dish in that we would have growing up. There would be some rice because rice is filling. So
exactly,
even if you don't have a lot of money, and but if you have rice and you add rice to the dish, it can be filling. So it
exactly.
was very practical and economic for us to even have rice. It wasn't my favorite, but it was something that will make sure that you're full at the same time. Okra, one of my favorites.
Especially fried okra.
I had to have a moment. When I tell you, good fried okra will change your life. Okay, like it's not the same. I know sometimes we may look at okra boiled and stuff. That's great too if you like it. But fried okra is life. Well seasoned, done. I mean, come on.
And that's the key. I want to put a pin in that, like seasoning. Like seasoning goes a long way. And of all the food TV shows that I've watched, from Top Chef to stuff on the Food Network to being in my grandmother's kitchen, like
Yeah,
seasoning is key. You
please.
can't just throw something out there without putting a little salt, some pepper, some whatever it is. Like you just don't give an empty plate. Like the plate is empty in essence
Right.
without the seasoning. So yeah.
No, that is key. That is key to any type of food we discussed in this series, in this episode. Pork. Um, okay, I'm happy that we brought pork, but I will say pork chops is amazing. Okay, I remember loving pork chop. Like that was everything. Well seasoned, well seasoned. Now it's important that I know from growing up that you never really measured it. Like you never was so specific in measuring. It's about taste. So you have to be in tune with the seasoning almost. Like you have to know how to season things properly. And I remember my dad would barbecue sometimes. He barbecued everything, but like pork chops,
Hmm.
and well done. My uncle, my maternal uncle, he loved, absolutely loved. That was his favorite food, pork chop. And it's nice. It's like it's great to remember him because he used to kill stuff.
And yeah, and although Pork and I don't have a history anymore, I will say I did love a good piece of bacon. I did love a good rib. You know, so and for me, I have no ill will against pork.
Me,
I just chose not to eat it anymore, and it's all good. I mean, for those that do, by all means, please enjoy. Be merry with it.
do it.
I do recall a good, good piece of ham, a good, some bacon on a burger or a bacon on just for breakfast in the morning. So I do appreciate it, even though I don't eat it anymore.
Right.
It did play a role in. I will say it added a certain touch to the collard greens that my grandmother would make.
Yeah, I think pork adds to every almost veggie anything dish on your plate. Like it adds that extra kick
That's
to it.
flavor. Yeah.
Now, I do understand, and eating turkey now, but turkey doesn't do what pork does.
No. Yeah.
Does not, and the thing again, I appreciate it. I love it. I have many, turkey, everything, but it does not do the same.
It doesn't.
You do have to reckon with that, but that's fine. But pork did a lot. And green, when you think about greens, okay, so we all know there's mustard greens, there's turnip greens, and there's collard greens.
Right. And if you want to throw in, I mean, I consider cabbage greens as a part of that. Like it's cabbage, but it's the green, it's the greenery. So that's I actually put that all together.
Okay,
So yeah.
You do that. That's cool. Congrats.
Because but you're right. And then then there's the other green that a lot of people it's like a new age thing. Kale. Folks are mixing kale with their collard greens sometimes. And I remember engaging with kale at a family event for the first time and was like, what is this? Like, this is not collard greens. These don't taste like collard greens. I don't like this, I'll do a kale salad all day. But as far as cooked kale in that way,
it's not the same. It's not
the same. Yeah.
Now I appreciate people who eat kale. I think kale is a great green. Like it's excellent. It works well. That's not part of my collard green family. That's not part of my green. That's a personal choice. When I say greens, and I specifically say greens, I'm really talking about collard greens. Now, again, there is this turnip and mustard green that
Yep.
Okay, like it's nothing wrong with that. That's what you like. I prefer collard greens.
Right.
Because that's life.
It is. No, and I mean, if I had a preference over the three type of traditional dark greens, yes, it would be the collard greens. Probably, I don't even know what would come next, to be honest. But because I'm just so tunnel vision on collard greens. But yeah, it definitely when you throw in kale, that's like the monkey wrench, like that sharp left turn. You're like, wait a minute, what is this? And when I think of soul food, and so let me clarify in the sense of like when I think of soul food, I'm not thinking kale.
Right. That agree with that.
So yeah. So what about this history of soul food? Like what have you, when you hear soul food, or when you I guess learned about it, like how did you what was your first encounter with soul food?
My life, like when I was born, soul food. Like that's my first encounter of it. And I would say, how we were talking about one point about Juneteenth, how we didn't even learn about it before certain aspects of Black history, how we didn't really learn about it until later in our lives. One thing that I always knew about was soul food. Like it was something, one, we were eating it, and two, it was something, it's a sense of pride in our community.
Right.
And so we know that it has origins in antebellum South or in the antebellum period, holistically. But in that, it's like, I would hear stories from my family about, okay, we couldn't get the best food. So we did the best we could with one, what we were given, and also using our own skills and resources about what, now that we're doing this stuff, with the land, how do we learn from the land? How can we eat from the land? Because you have that conversation of, soul food is a mess, is this nasty. No, actually it is fantastic. And we'll talk about the health components of it later. But the creativity of our people to employ the skills they had before slavery and bring it here in the mix of being enslaved and being able to continue these traditions. And also in addition to, the meats that were included, living off the ground, like living from the ground, or things like that, from the rice, from the plants that we would get from growing their own gardens, from things of that nature. So that's what I got from it, where it was not like, oh, this is what we got, it is what it is. It was more or less like, it's empowering how we may not have gotten the best, but we did the best of what we got.
Yep.
It's like, that's how that.
Yeah, much the same way. I mean, that was all that was cooked in the house. So to me, it was never like this special dish. It was never this special type of meal. That was just the norm, So it's interesting, like when you go to like a soul food restaurant, like, because that was what our normal meal was. So it wasn't like, oh, we get to go to the soul food restaurant today. The same way that I think of when I go to a sushi spot, or when I go to an Italian restaurant, which I'm sure like if you speak to Italians, like this is what they eat. So
Yeah,
it's
right, exactly.
a special thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, and there's definitely like these traditional practices that, primarily come from West and Central Africa,
Yeah,
and indigenous people that we definitely see today still. This whole community effort, this so passing down oral history,
right,
um,
right.
how we cut up. Like there was no like chopping up. Like I saw my grandma picking greens and cutting them up with her hands,
Yes.
washing them in the sink, you know, before you had to cook them, like, or washing the chitlins, you had to get everything out of there in this big old bucket.
And open all the doors and windows in your place. There was
Yes.
nothing closed. Everything that could be open will be open when they're getting ready to prepare some chitlins.
Yep.
There's nothing that could be closed. You won't survive. The smell may linger for a couple of days, depending on your house,
But
but it's worth it.
you knew that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't care about that.
It was definitely conversations that were happening. I can only imagine what was happening in the South and when they first came here, and the conversations that were being had while cooking, or whether it was planning an escape,
Yes,
whether it was talking about the family unit. Like so much was going on. Like these were important moments, when cooking happened.
right.
I used to be right up on my grandma trying to like just figure out what was the end thing. And it wasn't about because I knew what I was doing, because I was learning. It was
Right.
just I wanted to be in her presence when she was cooking all the time, never failed.
Well, I would, okay, so the kitchen was a spirit. Okay, so my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, if you were in the kitchen, she was not about everybody just being in the kitchen, just being in the kitchen.
Right.
She was like, okay, come in the kitchen, we'll teach you how to do stuff. However, one of Catherine and Kelly's children burnt something, and that was the last time we were in the kitchen. It's only two of us, and it wasn't me. But that's fine. What else? But that is, we were able to be a part of the process outside the kitchen,
Yeah.
like, learning outside, in different ways. Then I want to go back to the collard greens though, because we nowadays I see a lot of people cut it up, nice little cut
Yeah.
collard greens with the knife. My girl be like, what are you doing? My mama, like, you better,
Exactly.
are you serious? Put it in the water, put some salt in that water because you got to kill stuff now.
Right.
Put in the water, clean them greens really good. I did learn that. I will say that, but I
Yeah.
could never cook. It wasn't my time. It wasn't my time.
It's your time. Okay.
It wasn't. And so even when you think about this whole process of what soul food is, I want to bring up a quote that was in High on the Hog, which we'll talk about a little bit later, by Michael Twitty, when he said, "We are the only people to name our food after something invisible."
Yeah.
That to me was so powerful
Yeah.
because he even expounds that a bit. It's like connecting to our ancestors. It's
Right.
connecting to our spirit. It's connected to something that we can't see. And that's how I feel. And again, I want to always use this cabbage thing because I'm gonna find the taste. I'm gonna get the taste. But it's like, again, this connection that I have with my past. I need to learn. And I'm gonna get the barbecue recipe. But again, when you think about this soul food, it
Right.
is our soul. It's about, again, coming together. It's about us being in community with each other. It's about acknowledging our past and forgetting who we are and really affirming our identity. So
Right.
soul food is more than just dishes that we eat. It's more than just, okay, you're hungry, whatever. But it's like, you may be hungry, I'm going to feed you. That's part of my love for you. That's a part of my spirit for you in this community. Like that's what's so beautiful about soul food. Like you said, we grew up with, because we grew up in this community, in this family where it's like, it's always about family.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
we always cooked from our soul
Right.
and handed to other people. Like, this is me saying that I love you.
Yep.
So yeah.
And so when we also think about like, so we've definitely established that yes, soul food is something that is much more than just about the food.
Yeah.
It's about the internal, the external, everything. There's many moving parts. Let's just say it like that. So when we also think about the actual buildings of soul food restaurants, then that takes it to another level, because these were like Black owned spaces. These were also spaces where people came to socialize. This is where people came to meet. This is where people came to eat together. Meetings took place here, church gatherings took place here. If we think about the civil rights, like not only was the church, like an essential place, or barbershops were essential place, but like these soul food spots.
Yeah.
I think about Pascal's, the original one, not the new one over there. But
Down by Georgia State, the one that's down, is that Pascal? What is Pascal's?
No, so Pascal's used to be, it was a hotel and there was a restaurant that was right on the Clark University's campus.
Okay.
So that was like the what I believe to be the original one. And then there was a new one that you kind of see in Castleberry.
Okay.
That's the newer Pascal's, but I'm talking about the like original, the OG of Pascal's.
Okay.
And this was where, a lot of civil rights, leaders came to, break bread. And the importance, of these spaces, and even like the importance of the kitchen space. Like these were very sacred,
Yeah.
very monumental, memorial places.
Right. And I think that is important when you think about the space of it.
Yeah.
Like my grandmother was like, if you're gonna be in the kitchen, please know what you're doing, or just don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or pay attention, listen. So again, it's like you learning skills, and we also talk about this kitchen space. We talk about the porch space. We talk about the garden space. We talk about different areas where our parents or our again, foremothers, forefathers were teaching us about the food, how to prepare the food, and at the same time sharing stories about our past.
Right.
So this was like a very informative. These are informative spaces.
Yep.
So yes, I was learning how to pee, but my grandmother was telling stories at the same time.
Right.
And I was learning about who we were. I was learning about our past. I was learning about the present. I was sometimes in grown folks' business that I should have been in, but I was, slapping feet. But like things like that, the fact that these spaces meant a lot, it's about passing down tradition.
Right.
And that was what was amazing. Even when we went to the garden, I know my grandmother had a garden, a small garden in the back of one of the places we stayed. And I would go out there with her and she would teach me certain things. I wish I would have known or paid more attention to what I was doing at that time. But learning how she used the ground to feed us.
Right.
So I didn't have a lot of money, but look, these tomatoes.
Exactly.
And so all that was again, learning about not only cooking, but this is a time with your family to really get to know who you are.
Right.
And to share these different traditions.
And I would even add to that, it was like survival. Like sometimes this is, people weren't able to necessarily go to the market. They weren't necessarily able to go to the grocery store. And, this is why it's important that there are not food deserts. Like, like this is why it's important that we have to nourish, the communities in which exist. And so,
I think that is key. When you talk about food deserts, because a lot of times people like, let's be honest what a food desert is. When you don't have a grocery store that has all the components of it, including any type of healthy options, having a convenience store somewhere does not count. Exactly. If you have a liquor store or whatever, that doesn't count. A food desert, when you do not have enough healthy foods for that population. And so then you have the issue of Black communities where we're in these areas where we don't have land to even work from. And so we're dealing with food desert even more critically because it's like we want to grow a garden, but we don't have space for that.
Exactly.
And so, community gardening has been great in these different locations. But when you're dealing with food deserts or when you're dealing with low income people in whatever group, then you need to find other ways in which to maintain yourself. And how we did was if we had any type of land, we didn't have critical land, we didn't have acres. We had this little patch of land. My grandma just knew what to do. I said, yes, grandma. And then, you also have you getting rice, getting things in bulk that you could always amplify the meal and make it taste delicious.
And so I think about, we definitely talked about how like food as this expression of culture. We've definitely mentioned how it's a very, very much a community building act. It's a it's this communal space, and it's about memory making, so I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more about the kitchen space itself, as you said, like if you were coming into the kitchen, there was a few things that needed to have to happen. You need to know what you're doing. If you're going to be in the kitchen, you need to help. in some sort of way. Like this isn't a bystander. This isn't a like spectator sport.
Right. It's
It's
not.
like you're gonna either be helping by cleaning a dish or by measuring out something. You're just not in here because you're in the way. I
Right.
remember people be like, unless you're doing something, you need to move out the way because you're messing, disturbing me here.
Mhm.
And
Because
so
it's sacred in that sense.
yeah,
Where
exactly.
don't come and just, take over the space like it's funsies. No, respect the space, respect the food, respect the cooking, respect that I spent money on this, and I don't need for you to come in here and play these games.
Right.
So all this is a part of that, like respecting the space.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
don't come in and knock something over, do whatever, be whatever you're doing. Pay attention, listen, and learn. It's a learning time. This is
Exactly.
time to learn from, your elders
Right.
how to survive. Like you said, survival. How are you? Let me teach you how to survive because there's going to be times when no one can take care of you.
Right.
This is how I'm going to teach you how to take care of yourself. This is how I'm going to teach you to survive when you don't have much.
Exactly.
Yes, like,
And also how the kitchen, is a very gendered space.
yeah,
So when I think about cooking, like I'm always thinking about my grandmother. I'm always thinking it's for me, it's always been a very female dominated space. And so, but then it's interesting when I look at the kitchen from a commercial standpoint. So
yeah,
I'll take the example of a TV show that I really like, Top Chef. It becomes interesting how it's more male dominated, and
yeah,
that when there is a female chef that's being featured, like there's this another level of pressure that's given put on her, or that it's almost like women don't belong in the kitchen, but yet they're also been told that's where you belong, in the kitchen.
right. Because
uh,
that's that phrase of like women are cooks and men are chefs.
yeah. And so
That
it's interesting how in the very commercial space, how it, like I said, it's very gendered in the sense of like who gets to be in here, who
yeah,
gets to belong, who belongs in this space, you
that
know. So yeah, I always find that interesting. And then the idea of labor,
yes, yeah,
it's very often when you talk to people or read memoirs about different chefs and folks that have worked in cooking, since like they put their all in it, like this is what they do, there is, or they have several side gigs, or they're moving up the ladder from being a sous chef or a dishwasher to becoming the executive chef, and how um, sometimes they miss things, they miss moments with family. So there's so many complicated layers of labor that
mhm.
go into cooking it and into that kitchen space. So
And I want to add to that. It's crazy because in my house, my dad cooked a lot.
yeah.
He was. I saw this gender space because when you go up in generations, like older generation, it seemed like it was more gendered. But
Yeah.
when my dad can cook,
Hmm.
okay, he was like, I got the kitchen. You can do something else. But like, it's still gendered in that conversation because even when I have that conversation of, oh, my dad can cook, it's like, yeah, but did he cook a lot?
Right. Right.
Actually, he did. He was good, and I learned a lot from him, and I'm still learning. I still ask for certain recipes, and so yeah. But I do think it's important to speak of it as a gender space. It
Yeah.
has a space for women to even survive and have our conversation because we know this is our space.
Right.
This is something that we can protect. And one thing I want to go back to, you said something about the civil rights movement and food. Oh, I forgot her name. I think her name was Georgia. But in Alabama, how she would make sure that she cooked for the civil rights activists. Like
Ah,
that still need to eat. And so her kitchen became this safe haven
yeah.
of comfort, even like, hey, come here. I know you're dealing with a lot out there, but come and eat a good meal. And so even then, it's like, yes, it's a gender space, but it's also been an empowered space for women. And
Hmm.
how also been their way in which to, in addition to multiple ways, one avenue for women to even contribute to what's going on. Even now, when we go home and we go somewhere, like, you may have an elder like, eat, come, let me eat, let me like feed you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that is like, thank you for empowering me to be who I am. Like, thank you. So that's even, I mean, when you think of food, yes, it's gendered. And yes, we need to talk about that conversation too, about women belong in the kitchen. We don't belong anywhere we are where we want to be.
Right.
But, how we have used this space that has become ours and made it ours
Right.
and has been, a way to survive. But again, my dad can cook. Now he can throw down. He learned from his mother.
Mhm.
But he was like, I can cook those. Let me cook. And so I really appreciate that in my household where we saw both, where
Yeah.
it's not just leaning on one side and it's like we both can participate in this house.
Yeah, and I just, for me, it's like I want the balance to be able to be seen that yes, this isn't just a one gender type of role. You know, as you said, like everybody can bring something to this table,
Yeah,
if they really want to, and it shouldn't be relegated to like, oh, like you said, men are chefs and women are
right,
however describe it. It shouldn't be that way. Like
right.
this is your passion, if this is what you want to do, regardless of who you are, you should be welcomed, into that space. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I
um
agree.
in addition to like these being very sacred spaces, the kitchen that is, and cooking, um as we've said many times already, there's a lot of stories that are being told, and I
Yeah,
think this is important as it relates to preservation, because definitely in the series High on the Hog, there is this, you know very much making sure people remember who started something, who created it, who brought it here, because it's so there was definitely I can't remember which episode it was, but I think it was the episode on our founding chefs, where
yeah,
they talk about how these different black restaurants and soul food spots have come open, like in Charleston in particular, and how they're not black owned. And so it's kind of like, in a way, like people have hoodwinked soul food. They have marketed it, they have commercialized it, they have monetized it and said, oh, well, I can make that, and a lot of things get lost when that happens.
it reminds me of even Paula Dean because she's known as this soul food guru. But
Yeah.
then at the same time, it's like, who's in your kitchen? And then at the same time, what about the racial remarks you make?
Yeah.
The racist remarks, I should say. And it's like, so you are winning and you have a great that's still thriving, mind you, in Savannah that's capitalizing off of the black experience, black culture,
Black labor. Yep.
black labor. Absolutely. Yeah,
Yep.
that's right there. Mhm.
So yeah, I mean it's so and this was something that Michael Twitty, who you mentioned earlier, talks about, like we have to document these things. We have to, because this wasn't, he was talking about like in culinary school, it wasn't like you learned about like black cuisine. Like
Yeah.
it was just kind of something that just kind of, it is not a teaching.
Hmm.
We it's just kind of like a part of it, part of who we are. And so you didn't learn that history, you got that from either your grandparents, or you learned from your aunties or someone else that told you about it.
Yeah.
So it's so important that we document these things, which leads me to talk about like cookbooks, you know and why it's important that those exist, and like they are credible sources, they
They
are
really are. They really are.
very much needed.
I'm not a cookbook person, but I do agree that it's a great way to document. Because the thing is, you got to keep in mind, black people are not, we don't all cook soul food the same way.
Right.
But when you have cookbooks, it gives you this baseline idea of what should be included. Then, based on your own culture or household, then you add whatever you have to do, or you manipulate accordingly. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah,
And so, speaking of, like different recipes, different ways, as I like to always say, we're not a monolithic people. And
nope.
so, one of the first soul food cookbook has been attributed to Abby Fisher, and which was titled "What Mrs. Fisher Knows About Old Southern Cooking," and was published in 1881. So to
Mhm.
think that, like, there has been documentation
Yeah,
long ago, like
yeah,
1881. Um, and so it's essential that we have these things, that we have these texts, and even the National Council of Negro women
yeah,
produce cookbooks to fund their operations. It served as this charitable enterprise. So
yeah.
it's not only a way of preserving, but it's a way of building wealth. It's a way
Yeah.
of keeping the memory here, and
And
and making sure the community benefits from it.
yes, we still do that now. Like we sell plates to
Yes.
raise for like whether I don't because I'm not there yet. But elders will sell plates like this way of earning wealth, you
Yep.
know, absolutely.
So yeah, food and humanity, they're
Yeah,
intertwined. As you say, when we talk about I just can't help but think about the repast and how there would be this overwhelming amount of food.
yeah,
Like you and that during that time you weren't cooking because everybody else was cooking for you,
right,
bringing that to you. So and you had
exactly.
plenty. Like there was no shortage of anything.
Right, and I think that is critical too, 'cause when you think about, like you said, families are mourning, dealing with these things, and so we show our love by saying, "Okay, let us feed you."
Yep.
That's what I can do. I can care for you through food. Like, so I do think a repast is good, and also when if you ever went to a Southern Baptist church, you probably be in church about 4 or 5 hours. So you get very excited when the announcement is made. Church mothers have
Yeah.
down. Oh, that's all I wanted. So even that, it's like it's help save us, bring us closer to God. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's important as well. And cookbooks. I wish my grandmother would have wrote down the recipe, but
Yeah.
then she wouldn't have. I think you know how when you ask elders like, what do you put in to make it delicious? They're
Right.
like, put some pepper in it. Well, how much? Well, just put enough. You don't know how much.
Like I don't know how much.
Well, no, I don't know. And so that to me, it taught me to really trust myself and my own taste.
Yeah.
Like it's not about copying, it's not about being exact. It's about trust yourself. This is your dish. Make it your own. It's still a part of us,
Mhm.
but you do it now.
And an ingredient that goes back to Michael Twitty's quote about this creation of something invisible is like emotion and love and pain. Like I've always heard like people are like you can't be angry and cook because that gets into the food. Like you
Yeah.
feel that you will taste that.
Mhm.
And so when people are like it's just a little bit of love that I put in like that we
You can taste love.
how do you measure love? What is love? But like because it tastes a certain way. Like you
Right.
feel it, you embody it. It's like, oh, that feels good to my soul.
It's like
And
I know you care for me because you made this delicious dish. Do you know who don't like you also? Like, oh, you don't really care if I eat well or not.
yeah,
Yeah.
like you can't be careless in cooking because
Yeah.
then that comes out in the dish.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, like these invisible emotions
Mhm.
are essential to cooking because I don't want you upset when you making a meal
Please
because
don't. But we can go out and eat if you want to do that. Don't waste your stuff. Just everybody calm down first. But
right.
I do agree with that. It's about love. And I knew my family loved me because my grandmother, she would, how people these days, you have your lunch, you have your after school lunch, and then you have your dinner. And my grandma would be cooking whole dinners for us after school.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, we just had lunch,
yep,
but it's delicious. I'm not gonna turn it down, but that she did it out of love. Like I know your mother and your father will cook you dinner, but let me do this for you.
right.
Like you do that, I will take it. Thanks.
Yes.
Have this for you to be holding.
and and the ways in which our grandparents and our parents used everything. you know,
Right.
I mean, this takes it back to the origins of like soul food, using the scraps. There was nothing wasted when you were eating and cooking the food. We
Isn't
used everything.
yeah, and that's what my dad what's it called? Like goulash?
Oh, ugh, I don't like goulash. Mm-mm.
I don't know. But he loved goulash. He used to make it like bet. We're gonna have goulash tonight. This is all we got. She'd be like,
Right. That's when you tell yourself, "Oh, we running low on stuff in the refrigerator. We
oh,
ain't got."
someone please ask the chicken somewhere else so we cannot have goulash. Like, but that was one of the things. And also, I would say I'm not gonna give away the recipe because it is a secret. But a certain way, my chicken I got from him, and he used it, and he explains like we make it this way because we didn't have a lot of seasoning at that time.
Okay.
So it was a certain way he was able to that creativity.
Yeah.
Like he's like, you don't have to have everything, but what you have, make use of it.
Right. Right.
Except for goulash, I don't really get that. But everything else is like, you know, again, about sustenance, about like how do you survive? It's about, you know, you may not have everything, but we good.
Exactly.
And I like that.
It was also resistance. You know,
Yeah.
this was a way to you know, if I can't tell my story this way, I'm gonna tell it through this way. So
Right, right. Mhm.
is a way to, you know, I guess one could say kind of buck the system, you know,
Yeah,
like this is how we make food, you
right.
know. And so and it's interesting because a lot of people like that way. They may never actually verbally acknowledge it, but it's the way that we see it all the time, the way that it is exhibited, the way that it is shared.
Mhm.
Like, you know, you love it. You don't
Yeah,
have to tell me it's okay. I see it everywhere. That's enough for me to know that you like it, you love it.
exactly. And like you said, resistance, we may not be in a food desert. That's fine. We'll make it work.
Exactly.
We'll figure out what we got. We'll work from the land that we may have. We may have to get plants and then cook it, you know. So yeah, creativity at its best. And you know, sometimes you know, soul food gets a bad rep. You know,
Yeah.
like oh, soul food is just uh, a reminder of or a remnant of oppression. It's about no. mm. See, that's the thing. It's like you giving oppression too much credit. Now,
Say it again. Say it again.
you're giving oppression too much credit. Bring it back, okay? This is about us. It's not always about the others. It's about us wanting to do something and show love for ourselves.
Hmm.
Like, you know how people say, don't give the devil too much credit. Don't give them all the credit for that. No, we did this. This is us, and this is us shining through as we have always had done. Like this is nothing new to us. We have been resisting since the beginning. This is not just even resistance. This is about our survival, our maintenance of our culture. So
Hmm.
it's much more than oh, it's just about oppression. It is honestly, who it's not about that. Yes, we understand that the way our cuisine has developed did come from enslavement and things of that nature. Yes, we can't talk about soul food without acknowledging those forces, of course. But
Right.
it's not just about that, and we
Exactly.
should not reduce soul food to that.
Right. And you have your folks who will say that, you know, Dick Gregory was one to, you know, a very huge person of saying that, you know, soul food was a basically a slow death for African Americans. And we were kind of talking about this, you know, before recording here, that like you asked the question of like, do you think soul food can be healthy?
Yeah,
Because it's got this rap that it is just, you know, it's bad for us, it's salty, that, you know, it's not good for you, like you said, it's a remnant of oppression, it's
yeah,
all of that. And in my mind I'm thinking, you know, soul food can be good for you.
right.
It's
Okay.
really all about the preparation, you know, because if I go back to my tried and true collard greens, if you know, that's one of the most healthiest things you could probably eat.
Yeah, come on now.
So it's the preparation of it though. So, you know,
Right,
yes, okay, maybe you don't put a whole ham in there. You know, maybe you put a little bit, you know, of ham, a quarter of it. Or
right,
maybe you use turkey instead. Or maybe you use chicken stock instead. Or, you know,
right,
maybe some
right.
kind of alternative. But it still has, you know, it may not be your grandma's, may not be your grandpa, your aunties, who's ever, but it is still soul food.
Right.
And
But
there's a way to make it so you feel good about it. Like I don't feel bad about eating.
I
So
never felt bad about eating soul food. I was like, this is us. And the
mhm,
thing is, it's like when you think about health, first of all, it's holistic anyway. An extreme of anything is too much. I believe now, I do understand that if you eat dessert, no matter if it's soul food or not, it can be extra.
yeah,
Or if you eat too much of salt, that's just extra, whatever. But there's ways in which we've naturally seasoned our food that has been healthy.
exactly.
And even okay, this may be a question. So pot liquor, right? Is the juices from the collard greens, but
Yeah,
in those juices, there's nutrients.
it is. It is.
So it's like we like to put cornbread in the pot liquor. It's a whole cuisine in itself. It's a dish. But don't eat it by itself. You're gonna be hungry later. But it's delicious. But in that, you get the nutrients from the greens.
Hmm.
It's amazing. And again, too much of anything is problematic. And I'm
Exactly.
not saying that, all soul food is healthy, like holistically, but it's find a way to make it work for you in
Right.
your health.
Yeah.
Find a way. If you have issues with salt intake or whatever, there are other things you can do. There's other seasonings you can try, just like you said, turkey meat, whatever, whatever. But it's no need to completely denounce soul food
Right.
because it's myth that you'll die if you eat too much of it. It's like, no, don't let don't let people tell you what you can and can't do for yourself.
Right.
You know how to make it work. Soul
Exactly.
food is life, okay? It's about spirit. It's soul food.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
In that, I also want to make sure that in all of this, recognize, like, actually name some people who are very significant to our joy of Black cuisine. So, a gentleman mentioned in High on the Hog, James Hemings, who, yes, happens to be the relative of Sally Hemings, who we all know about. So we don't need to rehash that. But James Hemings was a very refined chef, was French taught, brought a lot to the table, literally and figuratively, and often doesn't get acknowledged as much as he should be. So we're talking about someone from 1700s, that really was doing his thing as it relates to cooking. You have the late Edna Lewis. You also have Leah Chase, who was, like, they said, like, the Queen of Creole. You have Bryant Terry, who is a chef in the Bay Area, who also has brought attention to sustainability. Because, as much as, yes, we want to cook, we also want to figure out, how do we make sure we sustain? How do we make sure we eliminate, like you said, the food deserts? How do we make sure that everybody, no one goes hungry, in essence?
That's it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go off that one point real quick. No one goes hungry. That's part of our community aspect, the
Yes.
communal field of soul food. No one is to go hungry. And so we would stretch what we have to include you in our meals.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to throw it out there. Yeah.
Yep. Patrick Clark, Robert W. Lee, Tregay Frazier, Carla Hall. There's many, many more. Like, I could go on and on, but I wanted to definitely recognize those individuals because many of them are James Beard Award winners. Many of these are award-winning chefs, getting the first Michelin star. Black people to get first Michelin star, which in the culinary world is a huge big deal. Each of these people have contributed to the culinary world in some sort of way that we need to make sure that we acknowledge Black chefs and Black cooks because they don't get recognized and have not been.
And I also want to talk about the Kanika Robinson Award winning chefs. You have Sarah Ellen Penn, my grandmother. You have Kelly Robinson, my father. You also have Miss Annette Beasley. She is amazing. Okay, so these are just a few of the Kanika Robinson Award winning chefs. So
I didn't realize that that's what we're doing, because if that's the case, let me make sure I recognize Susie Gibson, the ultimate of cooks and chefs, that's who my idol is. Yes, there were others, but there's none other like her. So since we give him, personal.
Look, the Kanika Robinson Award winning chefs is an important title, okay? It's there. Thank you.
Gotcha. So yes, wanted to make sure that we provided you all with some additional resources. So there is a website called Black Food Folks that is an organization for Black professionals in the food industry. So we got to work together. We got to build a community, build the networks. So that is a site definitely that folks should check out. Also, another site is Black Culinary History. Which is about preserving and paying homage to our collective Black culinary heritage, and also challenge the misguided narratives that basically exclude, any coverage on, Black chefs. And this is done through storytelling and preservation. And then you want to tell us a little bit about what your thoughts on High on the Hog and for the Netflix series?
First of all, please watch How in the Hall. What's the full name? How African American Cuisine Transformed America. One thing I like about it, it's not long, it's only 4 episodes, but it really traced our roots of certain cuisines
Yes.
from different countries in Africa to here. Even, in addition to just the cuisine, but the actual social, political, economic history of, enslavement and how it even got here. And also how we our food changed once it was here. And so I think it's a very well done series because I didn't know half the stuff. I didn't know. Okay, I don't want to say what I didn't know because I don't want to get picked on. But there are certain things that I was not aware of. But one thing that I found very interesting there was the whole sweet potato and yam
Yeah.
conversation. That I was like, what? So that was cool. And even conversation on Carolina rice, gold rice.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Just watch it.
No,
Um,
no, I need you to share your thoughts on, because it's a very, we've had a conversation about this, and I think it's important to at least give our viewers and listeners a little taste of that.
okay, let me give you a take. So rice came, we were the ones, Black people were the ones to really cultivate rice from the land. California Gold is a company,
Carolina.
Carolina, my bad, Carolina Gold, right? And so they produce this type of gold rice. And the host asked the owner, hey, so would you have this if it was for Black people? No, we would not have had this if it wasn't for Black people. If it wasn't for Black people tilling the land, et cetera, et cetera. Right? He has a series of questions in regards to that.
Yeah.
And so he makes money. He makes a lot of money from Carolina Gold. Um, and so he said, the host asked, well, why do you do this? Whatever. I want to give an ode to my mother who loved this rice. I want to do everything, yada yada. Now, what really got me was very, very interesting. He said, Carolina Gold has had its own pathway to reparation.
Uh-huh.
How, you say? He said, well, because I make so much money, we rich, giving all the way around the world, giving around the world, we're able to give out some free rice to people in our community.
Yeah.
That's his pathway to reparation. See, I my thing is, okay, well, more needs to be had. You can bring a fish to water, but you need to teach them, bring a person, what's it called? Bring a person to water.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Right. Not that one then. I meant the one about the fish.
Oh,
So either way, okay. My thing is, yeah, okay, now you have people who can eat dinner or lunch or breakfast now because you gave them some rice. Can you give them equity in your company so that they can also make money off things that you have openly acknowledged that you got from Black people,
yeah.
from our labor, from our culture, and you give them some rice every now and then
Yeah.
and say, this is my pathway to reparation. It's like, no, reparations mean more than that. You have to deal with the systemic issues that has led to the problems now. Giving rights is fine, yes, cool. But what about financially? You're still profiting off our culture and
Yes.
so much more with Carolina Gold, which I'm sure people like, fine. But again, we have to talk about, well, what is reparation?
Right.
And everything can't be reparation. Some things are just simply charity.
Yeah.
Is this reparations, or as you're saying, hey, you can rights every now and then when you're free?
Yeah. True indeed. True indeed. And like I said, that is just a small, it's not small. It's a good part of the episode, and that's the episode Rice Kingdom, obviously. And I think it's important to have that discussion
Yeah,
because of what has already been taken away from Black folks already.
right.
And so, here's something that we are trying to maintain our history,
Yeah,
in this very complicated space, I would
yeah.
say.
It's
And
very complicated. And again, I'm not going to say he's not trying, but
right,
if you're going to talk about reparations, it needs to be a critical discussion.
exactly.
It's not just about, oh, this is my own pathway. Be mindful of reparations. It's a critical discussion, not just, I want to give some rights back. Well, how are you going to maintain, or how are you going to support Black communities,
Right.
giving them just rice sometimes?
And speaking of giving back, in several of these episodes, we see how there is this giving back to the community. We see how this way of the community coming together.
Mhm.
There was when they were in South Carolina, and they were roasting the hog, and they had dug out the area for the hog and put it in, and it was this like process these over several days, and then once it was done, you brought in the community, not just, oh, you can come. No, it was anybody who wanted to take part.
I want to do that one day. I mean, I want that to happen.
Be able to just witness that, because even without having to just take part in the food, to witness this act,
Mhm.
witness this tradition that still is happening, that is
Yeah.
still carrying on. This isn't something that just happened in the 2000s and the 1990s. Like, this is something, a long-standing tradition. um I also appreciated that I learned a little bit about Benin that I did not
Yeah.
realize. So,
Yes.
you know, the series, which is based off of cookbook author Dr. Jessica B. Harris's book High on the Hog, a culinary journey from Africa to America. She it talks to us, or brings us our attention to, Benin specifically,
Yes.
which I think is a country that doesn't really get discussed often that much,
Mhm.
when we're talking about the continent, and its importance of a lot of the staple foods that we mentioned earlier being brought,
Right.
to
Rice,
the
okra, and stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah. So just like I said, it was more than just about, increasing my appetite, because by the end of the series I was severely hungry, but I was also very well nourished and informed, about my history, and there were several things also that I would learn. It was something that I think is very much needed, and that it's bigger than just the food. Actually,
Right. Right. It really was. Yeah, it's way bigger than the food. Again, soul food is a symbol of our past. It's a symbol.
Yes,
Not just a symbol, but it's also like it's a part of our culture. So
yeah,
to really understand soul food, you have to understand us and our past. And
yep,
so when we see this series, we get this context of, okay, yes, this is right, but we have
right,
to talk about the rice plantation. We have to talk about how we toiled over it. We have to talk about how it came from Africa and how we're able to do this. Our skills. We got to talk about all those things to understand the importance of rice in a dish.
yeah,
So it's not just, again, it's not just food. It's the
right,
soul of it, the culture of it that really speaks to why these are important.
yep.
Mhm.
And it also speaks to the importance of recognizing talent, constantly recognizing talent, and the idea of making sure that we're continuing to lift up each
Yeah,
other,
yeah.
because through this series we saw a lot of talent.
Mhm.
People that I immediately went on Instagram, which, by the way, if you want to know anything about Black foodies and Black culinary, just go to Instagram, Black foodies, and
Yeah.
a plethora of things will show up. And so
Mhm.
it's just so many different resources that I got from that particular series that made me realize, like, oh, there's so much more for me to learn
Right.
about our culinary heritage. So
Yeah.
much, so much. I thought I knew a lot, but clearly there's much more that I need to learn.
Yes, I didn't know. I really didn't know. And I guess, you know, it's just important not to take it for granted.
Exactly.
Take soul food for granted. Also, it's important that we preserve our traditions
That's right.
through food. It's one avenue, and there's other ways to preserve our tradition, but we can never forget what food does for us.
Yep.
So yeah.
So, speaking of what it does for you, we got to give our viewers our, personal culinary menu. Like, if you had your menu that you put together, that, for your, and not necessarily like a dinner party, but what's your meal? What's your ideal meal, soul food meal?
My spiritual meal would be baked chicken, cabbage, green beans. I love green beans, you guys. I just love green beans. I just love green beans. It's a thing. I would have to throw in some collard greens, but if you don't have it and you have green beans, you're good. Add some potatoes in those green beans. So again, baked chicken, cabbage, green beans. For dessert, pound cake.
Okay.
I love homemade, specifically homemade pound cake. I would love if you have some connection to Georgia and Florida in the making of this pound cake. I would appreciate that.
Uh-huh.
My favorite pound cake comes from Miss Annette Beasley in College Park, Georgia. Hi. Delicious. It's the way she cooks. She cooks it with love. She cares for me, and she
Yes.
loves me. Like you could tell. I call her Grandma Annette. I mean, you could tell her heart like is in that dish. Um, Drinks. Okay, I like carbonated water, flavored carbonated water. Now again, not Perrier. I'm not talking about that stuff. That's nasty. I'm talking about the stuff you get from like the dollar store that has delicious flavor. I suggest you add some like other flavor things like a crystal light to it. It makes it even more delicious. But I also like I used to like fruit punch is not the same. Mountain Dew on a good day or a bad day. Not Mountain Dew on a bad day. That'll help. That's what it is.
All right, all right. So for me, so collard greens, macaroni and cheese, those are essential. Like if I had it, you know how they say what will be your last meal, those two things got to be on my last meal. Um, and because you know, I'm like I said, being pescatarian, you know, I respect the chicken, the bird, the yard bird, all those things. But for me, I transition to the fish and
Yeah.
you know, or the shrimp. And so for me, it's going to be either salmon or fried catfish. You know, one
Okay.
that's
Okay. I
yeah,
love salmon. Okay.
you know, and the salmon can be cooked in a variety of different type of ways. So it's you know, it's really simple when you think about it. You got your starch, you got your vegetables, you got your protein. You
Yeah.
know, um, as far as drink, what? Oh, you wait. Let me do dessert. Uh, it's three things. Much like you, pound cake, and it's certain people that make a good pound cake. Not
Yeah.
everybody make a good pound cake.
I mean, we can make it, but it's not. It's
Right.
not. Mm-mm.
Peach cobbler, and I need you to have a lot of crust because you know it is about the peaches, but it's also just as much about the crust as well. And I need that corner piece. You know, I'm very serious about that. You know, and then only I've only had it from my grandma. I've had it from others, and it just isn't quite right.
I can get,
Um,
get it.
but it's a chess pie, or also it's a you know like a buttermilk custard pie. You know, originated in the South. My grandmother would make that. My cousins and I were just actually talking about this. How she would say, you know, what you want for your birthday, and we'd be like, I just want a chess pie. That's all I want from you. You know, you ain't got to cook nothing else. You don't have to do nothing else. Just a chess pie, and it's a very simple pie. It's got buttermilk, eggs, butter, sugar. It's real basic. It don't require a lot, and then your shell, you know. So, and in my drink, shout out to my cousin Dwayne, who used to make the best red Kool-Aid. And you all know it's not strawberry cherry, it's red Kool-Aid.
Red, like it is
You
what it
know, red drink, as I would learn when I would move to Georgia. um, so yeah, red Kool-Aid or red drink, you know, those were it was like the essential drink. And I can't even recall actually last time I've had some red Kool-Aid. Maybe it's about time I you know.
You know, I was thinking about that. We were just talking about that. I was like, I need to get some.
Yeah, it's the sugar, you know, because there's so much sugar
If you
in
don't
it.
have sugar in it, don't make it. Like you do need a good amount of sugar though. Like
You do.
I don't know what to tell you.
But I think as we've gotten older, we understand that you know diabetes is a thing, high blood pressure is a thing. But you know it's good to treat yourself every now and then. So I need to treat myself to some red Kool-Aid.
Add some water to that junk though.
Yeah, you definitely make sure you got enough water. Enough water.
Please, please add enough water, please.
But yeah, you know, we would love to know what is on your personal culinary menu. We would love to know what brings you joy as it relates to food. You know, it's all, you know, in the summertime is a great time for barbecues. It's a great time to grill. It's a great time to try out anytime is a great time to try out new recipes. But, you know, the summertime.
Not at gatherings. Do not try out new recipes at family gatherings or significant community gatherings. That is not the time. You try it at home by yourself. Don't bring your family into it. It's not for them. It's for you. Just yeah, that's when you try new recipes.
But we hope you enjoyed this another episode of Summertime Conversations on Feeling Good. It's all about the joy. It's all about bringing the happiness. And what better way than, you know, something good to eat? So which makes me think, what am I going to eat today? I got to think of that, you know, what's going to be on the menu today. So I'll figure that out. Maybe y'all can help me out. Give me some suggestions.
I'm definitely doing baked chicken, so I'm set.
So until the next time, we really appreciate you all tuning in, and you know, make sure you, whatever you do, fix a plate for me and Kanika. We'll make sure we'll stop by. We'll pick it up. All right.
Yeah.
You all have a great one. Till the next time.
Yes, till the next time. Enjoy.